Welcome to April's Brewing Tips video. This month we're going to talk a little bit about freedom and form and freedom. A lot of times we're confused about freedom and about the places where we can exert our influence and our spirit onto a tradition and which parts we should actually practice and learn before we begin to adapt them. Adaptation is great. It's how traditions grow and change over time, but the adaptation should come out of understanding. In order to adapt something, you have to first understand it and practice it, often for many, many years. And then if a master adapts his Tai Chi form, or if a master adapts a brewing method, and he does so out of the spirit of tea, then what's really great is that that adaptation isn't a person imposing adaptation onto the tradition. It's the tradition growing and changing itself from the inside. Growing and changing, not having things imposed upon it so that it changes from the outside, but actually growing and changing from the inside, because all of the changes are coming out of the spirit of the thing itself. As it evolves over time, it's getting better and building on the past, building on those that came before us. So in order to make adaptation, we have to first understand, and in order to understand, we have to practice. We have to make our tea brewing experiential. You have to develop a love for experimentation and an ability to create experiments so that you try different pots, different brewing methods, different ways of pouring, all so that you can grow. And if you use the 10 qualities of a fine tea that we discussed last month as your bullseye, as your standard, and you start doing experiments, you'll be able to experientially grow and improve in the way that you're brewing. But for some time, you'll have to also practice according to a certain form. And only then, after you've done that for some time, will you find the freedom in the form, which is true freedom and true mastery. Sometimes in the West, we have this misunderstanding that freedom is doing whatever you like. But that really isn't freedom. That's the freedom of youth. That's the freedom of a young person. Ursula Le Guin has this quote in one of her fantasy novels, the Earthsea series, that I like a lot, and I've adapted it a little bit and paraphrased so that it's relevant to deep life wisdom. She says that when a person is young, we think that freedom is doing whatever we want. But as a person grows in power and knowledge and understanding, you come to realize that freedom, true freedom, is doing wholly and completely what you must. True freedom is choosing your Dharma, choosing your Tao, so that your will is behind it. It's not what you must do because it's something imposed on you, but it's a must that is chosen. It's a must that comes from within and from without, and that's true freedom. When we first arrive into a tradition or into a lineage, we often have the feeling that the method that's being handed down is constricting. It's constricting our creative input and our personal idiosyncrasies and our reflections and our ways of doing things. But actually, we need that to be able to find true freedom. Some of you may not know this, but before I was a tea and Zen teacher, I was actually a kindergarten teacher. And kindergartners, they have a magic ability to dance, and their dance is very free. They're not inhibited by any ego, and they often can feel the music very beautifully, and they flow and move quite gracefully and in tune with and harmony with the music. And similarly, a master dancer, she's also free like them. They asked one of the greatest ballerinas of all time, "How do you perform so well?" And she said, "When I'm on stage, there is no music and there is no me, only dance." So she obviously is also very free, but her dance is very different than the children's dance. It's much more profound. Her freedom is much more deep. It's a knowing freedom. What she has that the children don't have is, first of all, she has a lineage. We can't underestimate accumulated power, accumulated understanding, handed down. All of our education is built on it. It's built on all of our ancestors and all that they have learned and discovered. Our science, our understanding of the world in which we live is all accumulated wisdom that's handed down generation to generation. And yes, we shouldn't blindly ape it, but we also shouldn't reject it. We must first understand it and then we move it forward. She had a teacher who had a teacher who had a teacher, and they carried forward a lineage of dance since ancient times. She also has something that the children don't have, which is decades of form, decades of practice. Now, when she first came to the dance studio, and the dance teacher said, "I want you to lift your leg like this over and over again, dozens of times a day," day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, just lifting your leg like this, she might feel like it's constricting, like it's limiting her freedom. It's limiting her creativity. It's limiting her expression and her personal interest and her personal desire to express herself through dance. But over time, all paths are movements from gross to subtle to subtle to subtle. In dance or in yoga, you start out with gross positions, but then your teacher will start coming and adjusting smaller things, making micro adjustments, and you start to get subtler and subtler and subtler. And one day, she will reach the level of subtlety where she will realize that in that movement of lifting the leg, there's actually infinite variation, infinite possibility. Where is her arm while she lifts the leg? Does she lift and then spin this way or spin this way? What does she do next? There's infinite variation in that one movement up and down of the leg. Similarly, when we learn how to brew tea, we might feel like doing it this way is constricting and that we're just following a tradition. But as time goes on and we begin to understand tea, these gross gestures of just showering the pot, steeping the tea, showering again, pouring, they begin to have infinite subtleties. And you realize that there is room for infinite expansion. Similarly in music, when you first start out, you might think a C is just boring, C, C, C over and over again. But musicians learn that their instrument provides infinite variation in the chords, in the notes, and that they can go from there to infinite directions. And so that then, after they have mastered those basics, they find the freedom in the form. They find the freedom in the form, and that's freedom with mastery. That's freedom with power, standing on the back of a teacher who had a teacher who had a teacher. And then the adaptation comes from the spirit of the thing itself. My teacher said to avoid adaptation that comes from either a desire to be quick and convenient, because when we choose the quicker, easier, more convenient way, often insights and traditions are lost and die that way. Many traditions are being lost in the world. Many different kinds of arts are being lost because we, as people, have chosen quicker and more convenient ways to live. As opposed to the right way to do things, we found quicker ways. And often these quicker, more convenient ways are also environmentally destructive, which is not good for our health and for the health of the world. So, that doesn't mean that all of the quick and convenient innovations should be set aside. Many of them are good, but oftentimes when we choose the quicker, more convenient way within a tradition, within an art, we miss out on many of the important insights that are essential for mastery of an art. It's kind of like taking a helicopter to the top of the mountain. Yes, you get up to the top, but is it really the same view as the one who has climbed up the mountain himself and passed through all the different legs and obstacles of the journey? I would say no. And I would say that many of the insights of the journey up and the journey down are essential for understanding the mountain. So quick and convenient is the first kind of adaptation that we should be aware of. The second is egoic adaptation, putting your ego into the tea brewing instead of learning to brew the tea the way it wants to be brewed. So if we adapt our brewing out of the spirit of the brewing, then that will be tea evolving and growing itself, as opposed to us imposing our ideas upon it. In that way, we stay on this side of the chabu. This is our way of speaking about it in our tradition. Because in our tradition, we're not here to learn how to make tea, we're here to learn how to serve tea. And in the process of learning how to be of service, to serve tea, we have to stay on this side of the chabu. Right? In our tradition, we make an effort to let go of all of our egoic hindrances, to let go of all of our personal dramas in our tea community and personal dramas between other tea brothers and sisters. That's all wrong side of the chabu. Stay on this side of the chabu. This side of the chabu is faceless. It's nameless. I'm not here to perform and to show off myself. I'm not here to demonstrate Wuda or his tea brewing skills. I'm here to allow tea to flow. To allow tea to flow into the lives of people and change their lives. She is the master of this center, not me. Tea is my master. My business card says, "Yi cha hui si." I go to tea as my master. Tea is the teacher in this center. Tea is what brings us all together here. Hundreds of people come from 30 countries around the world to visit this center. They come for tea. Tea is the spirit that we are sharing here. And so we need to serve tea. And in that way, if I allow the tea to flow through me, then I am as natural a part of the tea's expression as the sun or the rain that grew it, as the farmer's hand that processed it skillfully. The brewing then just becomes an extension of the leaves growing out, budding and growing because of the sun, and then being picked and processed, and then being brewed and prepared. It's all the natural flow of tea in its destiny. I become an essential part of its flow, as natural as the weather or the sun. And in that way, it's the Tao that's preparing the tea. It's tea that's preparing itself. But in order to do that, I have to learn my tradition. And then after I've learned for some time, for me, it was decades before I started adapting and growing and learning how to balance the different lineages that I represent in bowl tea and Zen and in Gong Fu tea, balancing them with the whisk tea, balancing these things, learning how to adapt them, how to facilitate the guests who are coming to the center, how to serve them. All the adaptations that I made came after decades of practice, practicing what my teachers had taught me. That's very important. We have to accumulate these skills experientially because we love tea. If you love music, you want to learn how to play better. You want to learn the notes. You want to learn the methods. You want to learn to make better music because you have a vision inside and you want to express it. Yeah? So like in art, you have some vision and you want to paint it, but you lack the skill and you don't know how to hold the brush. You don't know how to mix the pigment. And when you go to paint, what you paint doesn't look like what you see in your mind and you crumple it up. I definitely know what that's like because I'm also a painter and I've crumpled up my share of paintings. So I had to learn the skill. And in order to learn the skill, I had to go to a teacher and I had to follow their ways. And I followed them until I learned them, until they became second nature, until I understood them. And then only could I adapt the way that I held the brush or the way that I painted. And from there, I can start to then express myself. So the form that the dancer is doing over and over and over again is not constricting. It's the road to freedom. It's the road to true expression. If you have a teacher and you have a lineage, then you should follow that method of brewing and follow it until you've reached a level where you've mastered it enough that you can begin to make adaptations, right? But even then, try to stay on this side of the chabu. Try to stay out of the adaptations. Don't take authorship for them. The adaptations that I have added to this tradition, I don't want my name signed to them. In Asia, there's a tradition of unknown craftsmen. There are several books about it that are very beautiful to read. And you can see that people who made wonderful Yixing pots, people that made these glorious antique Qing Dynasty cups, they didn't sign their name. They didn't feel a need to put their name on their art. Many Yixing pots have the names of famous masters from the distant past, like Zhong Mingyuan and others. They created it and let it go. There wasn't a need for provenance. There wasn't a need to be attached to it. And that's very much in the spirit of tea, to stay on this side of the chabu, so that even when we do make adaptations, they aren't too much a reflection of my personality. They are adaptations born out of the spirit of tea and out of the spirit of sharing tea with more people, out of service, in other words. When we make adaptations out of that spirit, it's tea itself evolving and adapting itself. So, try to avoid these two kinds of adaptation, choosing that which is quick and convenient and putting too much ego into your tea brewing, and try to focus on practicing the traditional ways until you understand them enough, and then you can begin to express yourself. As you move from the gross to the subtle, you will find the freedom in the movements that were handed down, and you will begin to see that there is plenty of room for you to express yourself, for you to express your individuality and creativity, and that tea spirit can flow through you in that way, and it will flow into the lives of those who are around you and change them. Stay on this side of the chabu, and keep yourself out of it and just serve tea and allow tea to be the expression of your heart. Allow tea to be the expression of our communication with nature, our connection to ourself, and our connection to others. If you brew tea from that stillness, it will inspire a similar stillness in others. They will drink it and go to that place because it came out of that place. And in that way, your tea will begin to transform the lives of the people around you. Thank you for joining me for this month's Brewing Tips video. Hopefully these brewing tips help you to make better tea so that you can serve your community, and in that way, love will change the world cup by cup.